Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Trolls. With so many major studios having an animation department or an animation subsidiary or studio within them, there's so many big studio animated films coming out every year. There used to just be Walt Disney and maybe somebody else. But now, like every studio's got one. So the plethora of animated films and the different kinds of animated films is becoming often more and more common, letting us being able to cover many different topics and different kind of stories, but also having more and more animated films feel exactly kind of the same, to a point where you're like, oh, we have all this outlet for animation, why do you always seem to make kind of the same boring, kind of typical genre almost animated films, even though animation isn't a genre unto itself. But the idea of these films is just playing onto that they're an animated film and using that as a genre. Regardless, you kind of question the medium, because I'm often like, so this is the kind of films we're making now that we have this kind of outlet? And oftentimes you can be surprised. You can be like, I can't believe an animated film could do this. But then you have a dog shit movie like Trolls. And Trolls is like every boring animated film you've probably ever seen combined into one thing, with songs and a bullshit fascist message, which really is just there to sell a bunch of dolls and tell you to be like everyone else and just get over your addictions. If you can just, sort of just get over them and be happy, what's your problem? Trolls is borderline dangerous, a horrible movie, and brightly colored, and we're acting like it's a really good kids movie when it's not. It's awful. It's like if you went, hey, what if Strange Magic had more money behind it and people who could sing, but was still kind of Strange Magic awful and had better songs, I guess? I don't really get why you would like this movie. At the beginning of watching it, I had an open mind. I know some people liked it for whatever reason, but I was like, fine, let's do this. And I laughed a few times, but I kind of realized that this movie was like so many animated films I've seen. In fact, so many of the jokes felt recycled from other animated films. In fact, not even deep cut animated film jokes, like stuff from the trailers. Like the people who made this went, I haven't really seen much of this animation, but bring up the trailers for them Illumination Pixar movies or something. I don't know. Even the joke of like the troll or whatever that are, some of these like actual troll dolls, like I don't get the design thing. Like what the fuck are these things? One of the trolls, it's like a horse poops cupcakes, which is so similar and almost exactly like the shot in Secret Life of Pets, where the bunny voiced by Kevin Hart does the same thing, except in that it's a lot funnier because you have a funny voice actor doing it. But we just saw that thing in July. This movie was released in November, and that was a really popular movie with a trailer that got played a lot, which clearly the people who made Trolls probably saw. Well, I can definitely say they saw it because they ripped it off. And they have so many jokes that I've seen in countless animated films from Illumination and DreamWorks. They really shreked the donkey out of this one and reminded me why I totally maligned and hated this studio and didn't really consider them to be much until like they made How to Train Your Dragon. Trolls brings DreamWorks back to its roots from when you thought they were utter crap and not worth paying attention to, and makes you regret ever liking them, and sort of makes me not think any of the people who made the Kung Fu Panda movies or the How to Train Your Dragon movies had anything to do with this, and sadly they did. And it kind of shows the real decline of DreamWorks, that their big movie for the holiday season is a movie based on a bunch of troll dolls, which is even worse when you think they're making this as a way to capitalize on different movies that have been made off of toys, which are even better from what they did. So they actually failed in doing even the corporate synergy crappy evil thing that they're trying to do, and made a shitty terrible movie like Trolls. A bunch of small creatures who live in a state of happiness all the time and are singing and dancing, but then the Bergens, who can only be happy by eating trolls, which they don't really explain how that works, but they eat them and then they're happy. Why they're depressed, let's not get into it. And then they escape from the Bergens and stop getting eaten by them, and so for 20 years they're okay, and then they have too big of a celebration in their hidden place, which, you know, they couldn't really see the problem with that, but they did anyway. And the main troll, Princess Poppy, played by Anna Kendrick, is warned by Tree Branch or whatever, voiced by Justin Timberlake, warns her, and then it happens, and then a bunch of her friends get taken, and then they have to save them. So they go to the Bergens, and then she has to decide to save her friends and save her kingdom from the Bergens, so her friends and the rest of the trolls do not get eaten for their happiness. There's a couple major problems with this movie, and particularly this is actually pretty damning morally to show to any children. This will probably shape them to be horrible and evil people. First off, the whole idea of the Bergens, and that they just need to sort of get over eating the trolls because that's the only thing that makes them happy, like drug addiction. So basically the idea of this, any sort of alcoholism or addiction can just be cured if you just learn to be happy. Otherwise, there's no psychological or addiction problems. Just that's a great message for kids, and not simplifying a very complex addiction issue that takes most people their entire lives or never to solve. So thanks for that, trolls. Also, it's kind of just perfectly made and positioned to sell a bunch of crappy toys during the holiday season, but whatever with that. There's, so did Doctor Strange in a way. But the other thing with this, the whole idea that everyone should be happy, and if you're happy and like pretty much all the trolls, you are good and happy and will lead a fulfilling life. Basically, this film is kind of fascistic in its nature. It's asking everyone to be the same and be a certain way, and you will be happy that way. And if we are all exactly alike, like the trolls, we will all be happy, and nothing can be different from the trolls. And the same idea of the Bergens are unhappy and ugly and terrible and hate themselves. It's like taking someone that you have a problem with and making them into incredibly one-dimensional and evil. It's like really not a good idea to show that to someone and really let you think you can boil someone down that way, even someone who disagrees with you. And that's kind of the major problem with trolls. Morally, that's my problem with it. You're showing it to a kid and they're kind of understanding that someone who's against them and against what they believe in is a Bergen, an ugly, disgusting, fat, gross, unappealing character. And that's the real problem with trolls, is it's a terrible argument. It's a terrible, really, way to understand dealing with someone who's different from you. To think that they are kind of boiled down to being an evil, unappealing person because they're so awful, and how could they be different from you? And it's not really understanding the complexity of an argument, or the complexity of a war, or a complexity of a problem with another nation. It's boiling it down simply, digestibly, in the idea that, well, this is for kids, and kids should understand to totally hate things when they get older. Trolls will probably beget only more racism and kids buying shitty toys in the end. It's a horrible movie. It looks like Lisa Frank, which is what everyone's saying. If there was some sort of a point, the thing I think Trolls forgets that the Lego movie did so well is it used the idea of Legos to say something, to do an interesting thing conceptually. Trolls is just like, look, it's colorful. That's neat, I guess. It feels like so many different animated films. It almost feels like they just came up with a bullet point structure for what an animated film should be, filled it in, and made a Trolls movie. It feels super, super boring and very like a dime a dozen animated film that I've seen so many times. At least Storks had kind of the Warner Brothers style. This, it just had crappy versions of pop songs by Anna Kendrick and Justin Timberlake. I didn't really actually like their performances in this. It felt a little Pitch Perfect-y because Anna Kendrick is in it, and Pitch Perfect 2 did well, and people like those Pitch Perfect movies. They didn't really seem to find a point with it. The lighting that DreamWorks is usually fairly good at wasn't on display in this film. They didn't seem to use the cinematography that they're so good at. In fact, visually, I think it was actually a slight regression for them. It felt like an easy movie for them, an easy cash-in. I was incredibly disappointed by it and what DreamWorks was trying to do with Trolls, which I don't think was much of anything other than to have kind of an easy to go down type of movie. And it reminded me when DreamWorks rests on their laurels, they make, kind of Shrek like this, and nothing really good can ever really come of it. Trolls is just a terrible movie through and through. It really poses as being all these things about happiness and wonderfulness, but it really probably would be a movie that maybe Hitler would agree with or something like that. Which, you could say I'm I'm kind of taking the argument that I have a problem with Trolls and making it about Hitler, thus making my enemy, which would be this movie, The Trolls, into the problem that I actually had with the Bergens. But I think the difference is I'm really trying to say that I think the problem with this movie is it's really making their enemies into these ugly, evil things without really understanding them. I've seen Trolls. I tried to understand it. It is actually evil. The Trolls movie itself is actually a Bergen, but like an even uglier Bergen that will probably totally infect all of us with like a weird skin disease that'll be really uncomfortable or something. I really dislike this movie. All the songs were pretty bad. The True Colors moment was like especially awful. I don't really like it. I was okay with Troll Dolls. I don't understand what this had much to do with it. It just felt like a boring kind of typical kids movie that had pretty awful morals running throughout it. And I don't really think this movie has any business calling itself a kids film. I don't think it'll really do anything positive in the world. It's a happy movie with an ugly center. It's just a typical boring animated film. And as much as animation has pushed itself farther in this year than most years, really, it's kind of a sad state of affairs that one of the last major animated films of this year will be something like Trolls, which kind of makes you see why it's so hard for animation to really get anywhere. But then if major studios are doing this, maybe they're really stopping it from getting anywhere by making such terrible commercial fascistic kind of films like Trolls that hold both animation back and probably humanity as well, because this is really a kind of a piece of dog shit type of a movie that really probably shouldn't be seen by anyone, especially children, because I just absolutely totally hate this movie. So if you have seen Trolls and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. I don't know, just don't like Trolls.